You know, when your computer runs out of space or you have a file you just don't really know what to do with, you just drag it to the trash bin, you hit empty, and it's gone. Like, deleted. Clean.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Out of sight, out of mind. It's basically a binary system.
Exactly. But a physical, breathing city, well, it can't just hit delete.
No, definitely not.
When a society generates physical waste or, political tension or even just people who don't fit the traditional mold, I mean, that stuff has to go somewhere.
It needs a physical folder to sit in.
Yes, like a geographical junk drawer. And today on The Deep Dive, we're looking at a 200-year-old village in East Kowloon, Hong Kong. It's called Ngau Chi Wan, and it acted as, well, this exact kind of physical junk drawer for the entire city.
Yeah, and it's so important we talk about this now.
Right, because we have to excavate this space digitally right now. Starting in 2025, the bulldozers are actually rolling in to completely wipe the slate clean.
Yeah, the master plan is to demolish the village entirely. They're making way for, I think, 2,700 highly regulated public housing flats by 2033.
Which is just a massive shift. So to understand how this space functioned before it disappears, you brought in a really layered stack of sources for us today, right?
I did, yeah. Because to really get this, we are pulling from both ends of the spectrum. On one end, we have this very rigorous, grounded history.
Like the official documents.
Exactly. The 1819 Shan County Gazetteer, the official government heritage assessments, and some really dense academic sociological papers.
Okay.
But then on the other end, we have localized oral histories, and even these totally unverified, highly symbolic folk feng shui blogs.
Which I love, by the way. The feng shui blogs are fascinating.
They really are. And, the goal here isn't to necessarily separate the hard facts from the folklore.
Right.
It's more about looking at how both the concrete history and those, high-dimensional energy interpretations actually tell the exact same story about this space.
So for everyone listening, imagine a footprint of land that somehow simultaneously hosted a political rebel base, a feminist sanctuary, and a literal garbage dump.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. And to figure out how all of that coexisted, I think we have to start with the physical and social anchor of the village, right? The Sam Shan Kwok Wong temple.
Right, the Temple of the Gods of Three Mountains. The physical geography of Ngau Chi Wan is just crucial here.
Because it was out on the edge.
Exactly. It's nestled right at the foothills of Kowloon Peak. Historically, it was always on the fringes. So when Hakka immigrants built this temple around 1800, they were settling in this totally liminal space.
Okay.
And what the academic sources highlight is just how unusual the demographic makeup of this settlement actually was.
Because it wasn't just one family.
Right. A typical Chinese village at that time was structured around a single surname. You had a shared ancestral bloodline, and the geographical center of your community was the ancestral hall.
Right, but Ngau Chi Wan had over 10 different surnames living together.
Yeah, over 10.
So they completely lacked that biological safety net. I mean, if you don't have an ancestral hall binding you together, you kind of need an artificial mechanism to create community trust.
And the temple became that exact mechanism.
Right.
You have to remember, the Hakka were a migratory people.
Right.
They were often marginalized, frequently pushed out to the less desirable rocky lands by the dominant local clans.
So they were already outsiders.
Exactly. And they brought their worship of these three mountain gods from the Kaozu region. So the temple basically becomes the surrogate ancestral hall. It was the glue for a community of outsiders.
Which makes sense.
And, well, the utility of that alliance becomes incredibly apparent when we jump forward to the 1970s.
Right, because in the 70s, the village isn't just fighting for cultural survival anymore, it's fighting the actual machinery of the state.
Yeah, the colonial government was rapidly expanding its footprint.
Because they were seizing land for the modern public housing estates and the new mass transit railway, right? The subway system.
Precisely. There was this thing called the Crown Lands Resumption Ordinance, and it gave the colonial government these massive sweeping powers to just take over village lands.
Take it.
Yeah. And in response, the left hall of this temple undergoes this radical functional shift. It transforms into the headquarters for something called the Kowloon 13 Villages Committee.
It's just such a fascinating escalation. You have what is essentially a neighborhood watch, and it suddenly morphs into a full-blown political war room.
It really does. The villagers use the temple as a centralized staging ground to negotiate with the colonial government.
Oh.
Yeah, they organized protests, they bargained for fair compensation, and they really fought for proper resettlement terms.
So you have a temple dedicated to mountain gods who, in ancient Chinese mythology, were literally known for resisting empires.
Yes.
And then 7 centuries later, that very same temple serves as the command center for indigenous villagers resisting the modern colonial state. That historical symmetry is just striking.
It is. But, the sources also introduce a completely different way of interpreting this resistance. It shifts from political science to folk feng shui.
Ah, right, the energy lens.
Yeah. So the folk blogs in our source stack map a very specific energy grid onto the Kowloon Peninsula.
Like actual energy lines.
Right. They describe the landmass as being shaped by 9 dragon veins of energy.
Okay.
And the 9th vein supposedly runs straight down from Kowloon Peak, which is the highest mountain in the area, and it pools directly at Ngau Chi Wan.
Right.
So in this spatial interpretation, the temple isn't just a building, right? It acts as and this is a quote from the blogs, a trauma suppression device.
A trauma suppression device.
Yeah, they say it physically grounds the chaotic energy of a marginalized, exiled immigrant community.
Okay, I have to push back on that narrative just a bit, though.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's an incredibly cinematic idea, right? This trauma suppression device. But my question is really about causality here.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, did the Hakka immigrants pick this spot back in 1800 because a feng shui master told them, the dragon vein would empower them? Or is this just a story that later generations projected onto what was a convenient meeting spot, just to make their political fight in the 1970s feel like divinely justified?
That's a really great point. And the historical archives are actually very clear that there are no foundational texts or original blueprints citing the dragon vein as the reason for construction.
So it was retrofitted.
Yes, but sociologically speaking, the objective truth of the dragon vein matters a lot less than its function as a collective cultural language.
Oh, I see.
We really have to view the feng shui angle as a symbolic coping mechanism. When a displaced community is facing down the bureaucratic bulldozers of a colonial empire, claiming that the very energy of the earth is pooled in their favor.
It gives them a psychological anchor.
Exactly. It provides the audacity required
Yeah.
to stand your ground and say, we belong here.
Yeah, it's the story they needed to tell themselves to survive the pressure.
Ab-
And what's wild is that while this temple was facilitating this highly visible local resistance against city planners, the geography of this village was simultaneously masking a rebellion on a massive imperial scale just down the road.
Yeah, the geography in Ngau Chi Wan offered the absolute perfect blind spot. We're looking at a site historically known as Little Plum Village.
Right.
In 1908, a revolutionary named Shan purchased a plot of land here, and he lent it to a man named Sun Mei.
Sun Mei, who is the older brother of Sun Yat-sen.
Exactly. Sun Yat-sen, the figurehead of the revolution that would ultimately topple the centuries-old Qing dynasty.
Which is huge. And if you were to walk past Little Plum Village in 1908, it just looked like a quiet, unassuming farm.
Completely normal.
But the mechanics of why a farm was the perfect cover are actually brilliant. I mean, a working farm justifies the constant movement of heavy carts, fertilizer, laborers coming and going.
It creates plausible deniability.
Exactly. Plausible deniability.
And underneath that cover, they were running a clandestine rebel base. You see, Hong Kong was a British colony, which meant the Qing Imperial Police couldn't just cross the border and arrest them.
It was a jurisdictional gray zone.
Right, and within that gray zone, Ngau Chi Wan was perfectly situated. It was far enough from the British administrative centers on Hong Kong Island to avoid daily scrutiny.
But close enough to the Chinese border to smuggle people and resources.
Exactly. They used the farm to recruit anti-Qing activists, and most notably, they were using it to secretly sew the blue sky white sun flag.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which was a highly illegal, absolutely vital symbol for the impending revolution.
But the British colonial government eventually realized the scale of the liability, didn't they? I mean, they weren't keen on harboring a full-scale revolution that could destabilize their trade relations with the Qing Empire.
No, they definitely weren't. In 1910, just 1 year before the revolution actually succeeded, British authorities deported Sun Mei.
Wow, just 1 year before.
Yeah, the political pressure just reached a boiling point. But the fact that this operation ran for years undetected speaks volumes about the village's capacity to absorb activities that the mainstream world just wouldn't tolerate.
Right.
And, interestingly, the folk sources draw another one of those high-dimensional connections here, too.
You're talking about the matriarchal axis.
Yes. If you look at the topography, halfway up Kowloon Peak, which is the mountain sitting right behind the village, is the burial site of Sun Yat-sen's mother.
Okay.
And folk beliefs draw this direct vertical line from the mother's grave resting peacefully on the mountain all the way down into the foothills of Ngau Chi Wan, where her sons were birthing the revolutionary flag.
That is wild.
Yeah, it's framed as this energy flow from the matriarch down into the political action that fundamentally changed the course of East Asian history.
I mean, it's a beautiful, sweeping narrative. But when you look at the contemporary heritage assessments in our file, the reality of what happened to Little Klum Village is actually quite grim.
It is, yeah.
It feels like capitalism ultimately just paved over whatever revolutionary energy was pooled there. The site didn't become some grand, protected monument.
No, not at all.
It was sold off to a shipping middleman, and then later it was repurposed into a Catholic nursing home. And today, the documents show the remaining historic villas are literally just rusting away.
Just choked by vines.
Yeah, choked by vines, caught in this endless bureaucratic standoff between real estate developers and the government.
The physical space is basically trapped in suspended animation,
Right.
and it highlights this brutal truth about urban development. Physical spaces absorb these massive, world-altering historical events. But as the city's economic engines keep turning, those sacred sites eventually just become lines on a real estate ledger.
The revolution was absorbed, processed, and then literally built over.
Built right over.
It really makes you wonder how much history is just rotting under our feet. But, while these men were plotting the fall of an empire and dealing with colonial police, there was a completely different kind of revolution quietly operating right next door.
Yes.
And this one was entirely run by women, addressing a social crisis that mainstream society completely ignored.
Yeah, this part of the deep dive is incredible. We're looking at a compound called Manfat Tong, or the 10,000 Buddhas Hall.
Okay.
It was established between 1912 and 1915 by a woman named Lai Yuk-seng. On paper, it was just a Taoist sanctuary.
Just sanctuary.
Right, but its actual socioeconomic function was what made it so radical. It serves as a haven for a very specific demographic of women, primarily what were known as self-combed women.
And the history of these self-combed women is just, it's an incredible story of economic rebellion. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the silk industry in the Canton region was booming.
It was massive.
So women who worked in the silk filatures suddenly had their own income. And because they had financial independence, many of them swore off marriage entirely.
Right, which was unheard of.
Exactly. They would perform this ritual, combing their own hair, which was usually a task done by a mother-in-law before a wedding, to publicly declare their autonomy.
And you have to put that in context. In a deeply patriarchal, traditional Chinese society, a woman's value and her social safety net were entirely tied to her husband's family.
Right.
So by choosing economic and personal independence, these women stepped completely outside the prescribed social order. But the mechanisms that allowed this independence, the booming silk trade well, it eventually collapsed due to global modernization.
So the jobs dried up.
Yeah. And many of these women migrated to Hong Kong to work as domestic servants, who were known as amas.
And the tragedy is when they aged out of domestic work, they had literally nowhere to go. Traditional ancestral halls wouldn't take in unmarried women. Society had no folder to put them in.
Exactly. And that is exactly the gap that Manfat Tong filled. Lai Yuk-seng created a self-funded commune for women that the traditional family structure had deemed useless.
Wow.
They took in aging self-combed women, and they also provided sanctuary for former prostitutes. They sustained themselves through farming and, crucially, by performing Taoist rituals.
And at its peak, 50 to 60 women lived in this compound, basically operating a parallel society.
Yes, a parallel society.
And that detail about how they sustain themselves through rituals, well, it leads to one of the most striking, almost macabre anecdotes in the entire archive.
Oh, the doors?
Yeah, the doors. It happens right after World War II.
Right. So the Japanese occupation had utterly devastated Hong Kong. When the war ended, building materials in Ngau Chi Wan were incredibly scarce.
Impossible to find.
Exactly. And the women of Manfat Tong needed to rebuild their hall. Specifically, they needed heavy wood for front doors to secure the compound.
Okay, so what did they do?
Well, years earlier, because they were highly skilled in Taoist rites, these women had performed massive, exhausting ceremonies for the victims of the 1918 Happy Valley Racecourse fire.
Which, just for context, was a catastrophic event. Hundreds of people died when the grandstands collapsed and caught fire.
It was a huge tragedy. And in gratitude for their spiritual labor, the community had gifted Manfat Tong these large, commemorative wooden plaques. They were essentially massive wooden steels dedicated to the dead.
Right.
So after World War II, lacking any other resources, the women took these heavy wooden plaques, which were meant for the deceased, and literally hung them on their hinges to use as front doors.
I mean, the resourcefulness is incredible, but it's just such a heavy image. You are barricading your home with the literal markers of a mass tragedy.
Yeah, it's intense. And the sociological papers in our file frame this through the Taoist philosophy of yin and yang.
Oh, how so?
Well, it wasn't just a desperate architectural measure, right? It was a deeply symbolic act. You take objects meant to comfort the dead, the yin, and you repurpose them to protect the living space of a vulnerable community, the yang.
The yang. Wow.
Yeah. It is the physical manifestation of turning grief and societal trauma into a protective barrier.
And if you think about the geography of your own neighborhood, you probably have a public political center, right? Like in Ngau Chi Wan, that was the Shan Kwok Wong temple run by the patriarchal clans negotiating with the government.
Right, the very public face.
But hidden right alongside it was this completely alternative universe. I mean, by 1965, the archives show the women of Manfat Tong were so empowered and self-sufficient that they were running all-female Taoist ritual teams for the main village festivals.
Which was practically unheard of in traditional villages.
Exactly. It's like a 1910s feminist utopia quietly operating right next door to the patriarchal clan temples.
Yeah, urban sociologists actually refer to this kind of space as a heterotopia.
A heterotopia.
Yeah, it's a space of otherness. It exists right alongside the mainstream, but it operates by completely different, often contradictory rules.
I love that term.
And because Ngau Chi Wan was a geographical fringe zone, it provided the exact cover necessary for this feminist heterotopia to flourish, without being immediately crushed by the mainstream patriarchy.
It's fascinating how the geography provided a shelter for people society cast aside, but as we dig deeper into the archives, it becomes pretty clear that the city treated the physical soil of the village with the exact same disregard as it treated the marginalized people.
Unfortunately, yes.
I mean, the village didn't just absorb social and political tension, it absorbed literal physical waste.
It did, and the cartographic history of the village is just a perfect micro-study in spatial gentrification.
Okay, lay it out for us.
If we look at an 1866 map drawn by an Italian missionary named Simeone Volontari, the area is explicitly labeled Ngau Chi Wan.
Right.
And translated from Cantonese, that literally means cow dung bay.
I mean, you really can't get a more blunt assessment of a land's value than mapping it officially as cow dung bay.
No, you really can't. And it was a purely functional description. The land was primarily used as a transit point for herding cattle down to the city's slaughterhouses.
Oh, I see.
So the area was just constantly covered in exactly what you'd expect.
Right.
But over the decades, as the villagers moved away from herding and transitioned into farming and maritime trade, they wanted to shed that stigma.
Naturally.
So they engineered a PR makeover. They tweaked the characters to Ngau Chi Wan, which sounds almost identical in spoken Cantonese, but changes the meaning to Cowpool Bay.
Cowpool Bay. That's clever.
Yeah, they cultivated this whole new narrative that the local pond was merely shaped like a peaceful resting cow.
So they gentrified their own name.
They did.
But changing the name on a map didn't stop the village from functioning as the city's dumping ground, did it? The physical reality of the land, and even the bodies of the people living on it, continue to process the city's toxicity.
Yeah, that didn't stop.
There's a story in the oral history files about Yi-Sin Temple that mirrors this perfectly, right?
Yes. Now, the Yi-Sin Temple relies entirely on localized oral history.
Right. There's no colonial paperwork for this one.
Exactly. There are no colonial records verifying it. But the legend passed down is that an elderly man in the village became inexplicably and severely ill. No medicine worked.
Nothing.
He was only cured when he finally agreed to become a spirit medium, meaning a physical vessel for the gods.
And the mechanism of the cure is what's so interesting to me. I mean, he couldn't just take a pill. His physical body had to violently absorb the divine chaotic energy to purge the sickness.
Exactly. It is the absolute perfect psychological parallel to the village's macro history.
How so?
Well, whether you are looking at a single villager's body absorbing a spiritual sickness, or the entire village absorbing the trauma of colonial land grabs, the mechanism of survival is identical.
Trauma is absorbed.
Trauma is absorbed, it's processed, and it's converted into community resilience. The pain is literally metabolized into something functional.
Metabolized, that's the word. And if you want to see the most literal physical manifestation of that metabolism, you really just have to walk into the local park today.
Yes, Ngau Chi Wan Park. It's currently this lush, multi-tiered public green space. It has a jogging track, a beautiful Tai Chi garden, and these quaint little cow statues arranged around a water feature,
Really leaning hard into the cow pool branding.
leaning very hard into it. But if you look at the engineering reports, they show that this entire serene landscape is built directly on top of a massive, decommissioned garbage landfill.
It is the ultimate urban pressure valve. When the city's political or social pressure got too high, Ngau Chi Wan was the release point that kept the rest of Hong Kong from boiling over.
Right.
He just pushed the rebels, the unmarried women, the sick villagers, and the literal garbage out to the fringe, and the village just takes it. It filters that immense tension and waste and metabolizes it into temples, underground revolutions, and public parks.
That exact mechanism brings us to the grand theory proposed in the sociological research.
The centrifugal buffer node.
Yes. If you only look at the surface-level historical dates, Ngau Chi Wan is just another old village being demolished to meet modern housing quotas.
Right, just a development site.
But when you synthesize the geography, the politics, and the folk history, its true identity emerges. Researchers classify this type of space as a centrifugal buffer node.
Okay, let's break the physics of that down for the listener. Centrifugal force pushes things away from the center, right?
Precisely. Mainstream society creates an immense amount of friction and byproduct just to operate,
Right.
whether that's political dissidents, people who age out of the labor force, or physical trash. A highly regulated city center simply cannot tolerate that friction.
It has to expel it.
Exactly. And because Ngau Chi Wan sat in a geographic and administrative blind spot, not quite the heavily policed urban core, but not entirely the lawless wilderness, it acted as the designated sponge.
It caught the centrifugal overflow.
It caught it all. It absorbed the shock, so the rigid mainstream systems of the city could keep humming along looking perfect.
And that structural dynamic isn't just about 19th century Hong Kong. If you look closely at the systems in your own life, macro urban planning in your city, the corporate structure at your office, or even just the unspoken dynamics of your own family, there is always a buffer node.
There really is.
There is always that quiet gray area or that one specific person tasked with absorbing the chaos and the unspoken tension so the primary system doesn't collapse.
Complex systems rely on these margins to survive. But the major shift we are witnessing right now, the whole reason this excavation is happening in 2025, is that these physical margins are being systematically erased.
Which brings us right back to that blinking cursor on the empty trash bin. In 2033, the buffer node of Ngau Chi Wan will be completely gone.
Gone.
The physical space will be entirely replaced by highly regulated, hyper-planned public housing. The temples, the rusting revolutionary villas, the feminist sanctuaries, they'll all be bulldozed and paved over.
The slate will be completely wiped clean.
And so, we leave you with this to mull over. As we move deeper into the era of modern, ultra-planned, smart cities where every single inch of space is monitored, optimized, and categorized for maximum economic efficiency, where do the outcasts go?
That is the question.
Where do the misfits, the rebels, and the uncategorizable energies of society end up when our cities no longer have any messy gray buffer zones left to catch them?